Is the issue with my work, or with me? Marcus asked, his voice steady despite weeks of humiliation. The classroom fell silent as Ms. Winter's face hardened. She never expected this scholarship student would challenge her authority, or that his father would change everything with just 5 words, "I'm the person whose work you've been teaching." What happens when a prejudiced teacher meets her match in the brilliant black student she tried to destroy? A powerful story about standing tall in the face of discrimination. How many times have we witnessed talent dismissed because of how someone looks? Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Marcus Johnson took a deep breath as he stood at the entrance of Westlake Academy. The prestigious private school's imposing brick facade seemed to tower over him, a physical manifestation of the challenge ahead. As a scholarship student from the other side of town, he knew fitting in wouldn't be easy, but his passion for physics and mathematics had earned him this opportunity. "Remember, you belong here," he whispered to himself, clutching the acceptance letter in his pocket. The hallways bustled with students in crisp uniforms, most barely acknowledging his presence. Marcus made his way to his first class, Advanced Placement Physics with Ms. Victoria Winters. He entered the classroom and immediately felt all eyes turned toward him. The only empty seat was in the front row. As he moved toward it, Ms. Winters looked up from her desk, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You must be the new scholarship student," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Marcus Johnson, is it?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, standing tall despite his nervousness. "Well, you're late on your first day." "Not a promising start," she remarked coldly, though Marcus had arrived 5 minutes early. He hesitated before the empty chair. The pain in his lower back flared at the thought of sitting. 3 days ago, during orientation, he had encountered Ms. Winters in the hallway. When he'd accidentally bumped into her while checking his schedule, she had shoved him roughly against a metal railing. The bruising had gotten worse since then. "Is there a problem, Mr. Johnson?" Ms. Winters asked, raising an eyebrow. "I prefer to stand, if that's all right," Marcus answered politely. "I have back pain." Ms. Winters' lips thinned. "This is my classroom, and in my classroom, students sit. I don't make exceptions, especially for new arrivals trying to draw attention to themselves." A few students snickered. Marcus felt his face grow hot but maintained his composure. "With all due respect, Ms. Winters, I really can't sit comfortably right now." "Then perhaps you should visit the nurse instead of disrupting my class," she replied sharply. "Or better yet, return when you're prepared to follow simple instructions." Marcus didn't move. He had worked too hard for this opportunity. "I'm prepared to learn, Ms. Winters. I don't mean any disrespect." The teacher's face hardened. "Very well. Stand at the back of the classroom, then. But don't expect special accommodations on assignments or exams." Marcus moved to the back, feeling the stares of his classmates. As Ms. Winters began her lecture on quantum mechanics, he noticed her deliberately asking questions to everyone except him, despite his raised hand. By the end of the class, one thing was clear: this would be much harder than he had anticipated. Marcus's second class of the day was Advanced Calculus with Mr. Thompson, who couldn't have been more different from Ms. Winters. The gray-haired teacher smiled warmly as Marcus explained his need to stand. "Of course, whatever makes you comfortable," Mr. Thompson said. "I care about your mind, not whether you're sitting or standing." During the lesson, Mr. Thompson called on Marcus several times, nodding approvingly at his answers. When class ended, he asked Marcus to stay behind. "That was impressive work today," Mr. Thompson said. "Your previous school prepared you well." "Math just makes sense to me," Marcus replied, relaxing for the first time that day. "Well, you'll find a good home in my class. And don't worry too much about Ms. Winters. She's particular about her methods." "You know about that already?" Marcus asked, surprised. Mr. Thompson's face grew serious. Let's just say you're not the first scholarship student to face challenges in her class. If you need support, my door is always open. As Marcus headed to lunch, a voice called out behind him. Hey, new guy. Wait up. A tall boy with sandy hair jogged to catch up. I'm Ryan. You're in my physics and calc classes. That was rough this morning. I'm used to it, Marcus said, though it wasn't entirely true. Well, you shouldn't be. Want to join us for lunch? Not everyone here is like Winters. At the cafeteria table, Ryan introduced Marcus to his friends, who seemed genuinely friendly, except for Jessica Blackwell, who eyed Marcus with barely concealed disdain. So, scholarship kid, what makes you qualify to be in AP Physics anyway? She asked, twirling her designer watch. Westlake doesn't usually accept transfers senior year. Before Marcus could answer, Ryan interjected, lay off, Jess. Not everyone needs daddy's donations to get in. Jessica rolled her eyes. I'm just saying, Ms. Winters runs the most rigorous physics program in the state. Her students get into MIT and Caltech. She doesn't tolerate slackers or charity cases. Good thing I'm neither, Marcus replied calmly, though her words stung. I got a perfect score on the physics SAT subject test. Jessica looked skeptical. We'll see how long you last. No one stands in Winter's class. Everyone knows that. I don't have much choice, Marcus said, wincing as he shifted his weight. My back. What happened anyway? Ryan asked. Marcus hesitated. Just an accident during orientation, he said, unwilling to explain further. The truth would only complicate his already precarious position. As the day continued, Marcus discovered that Ms. Winters' reputation extended throughout the school. Even teachers spoke of her with a mixture of respect and wariness. By the final bell, rumors about the standing scholarship student had spread everywhere. Walking home, Marcus wondered if he'd made a mistake in coming to Westlake. But then he remembered his parents' proud faces when he'd received his acceptance letter, and he straightened his shoulders despite the pain. He would endure whatever came his way. He had to. 1 week into the semester, Ms. Winters announced the first major project of the year. This assignment will account for 20% of your semester grade, she explained, pacing the front of the classroom. You will design and execute an experiment demonstrating one of the fundamental principles we've discussed, then submit a comprehensive analysis. Marcus, still standing at the back of the room, felt a surge of excitement. This was his chance to prove himself. Ms. Winters handed out assignment sheets to each student. When she reached Marcus, she paused. For you, Mr. Johnson, a special topic, she said with a thin smile. Since you insist on standing out, you might as well earn it. You'll be covering quantum entanglement with practical applications. The class fell silent. Even Jessica looked surprised. Quantum entanglement was graduate-level physics, far more complex than the topics assigned to others. Is there a problem? Ms. Winters asked, her tone suggesting there better not be. No problem, Marcus replied, accepting the paper. Thank you for the challenge. As students formed into project groups, Marcus found himself alone until Ryan approached. Want to work together? I got electromagnetic induction, which isn't easy either. She'll never allow it, Marcus said, glancing at Ms. Winters, who was watching them. Our topics are completely different. Worth a shot, Ryan insisted, raising his hand. Ms. Winters? Can Marcus and I collaborate since our projects could have overlapping elements? Ms. Winters smiled coldly. Mr. Johnson has a special assignment that requires individual effort. I'm sure he wouldn't want any assistance that might diminish his achievement. Jessica snickered from across the room. Maybe he can stand his way through it. Several students laughed, but Ryan looked genuinely angry. That's not fair, he muttered. It's okay, Marcus assured him. I can handle it. That evening, Marcus stayed late in the school library researching quantum entanglement. His back still ached when he sat for too long, but the pain was gradually subsiding. As the hours passed, his initial intimidation gave way to fascination. The concepts were challenging but not impenetrable. Near closing time, he pulled a particularly helpful book on quantum physics from the reference section. As he flipped through it, a name in the acknowledgments caught his eye: special thanks to Dr. Elijah Johnson for his groundbreaking contributions to this field. Marcus smiled faintly. His father's work was referenced in advanced physics textbooks across the country, though few at Westlake would know that. Dr. Elijah Johnson had chosen to work at a historically black research university despite offers from Ivy League institutions, a fact he was immensely proud of. For a moment, Marcus considered mentioning this connection to Ms. Winters, but he quickly dismissed the idea. His father had always taught him to earn respect through his own work, not family connections. The next day, Marcus approached Ms. Winters after class with his project outline. "I've designed an experiment using photon polarization to demonstrate quantum entanglement," he explained, handing her his proposal. "I'll need access to the advanced lab equipment." Ms. Winters skimmed the paper, her expression unreadable. "Ambitious," she finally said. "Perhaps too ambitious. The equipment you're requesting is reserved for selected students preparing for national competitions." "I understand the principles involved," Marcus assured her. "And I've worked with similar equipment before." "Have you?" Ms. Winters raised an eyebrow. "Where exactly would you have gained such specialized experience?" "My previous school had a partnership with the University Physics Department," Marcus explained. "I participated in their summer research program." "How convenient," she replied skeptically. "Well, Mr. Johnson, I'll consider your request. In the meantime, perhaps you should develop a backup plan using more accessible methods." As she walked away, Marcus fought back frustration. Every interaction with Ms. Winters felt like a battle, and he was beginning to suspect that no matter how brilliant his work, she had already decided he didn't belong at Westlake. That night, he called his father for advice, careful not to reveal the full extent of Ms. Winters' behavior. "Physics isn't about equipment, son," Dr. Johnson told him. "It's about understanding the universe. If she won't give you the tools, find another way to demonstrate your understanding." Inspired, Marcus began reworking his approach, determined to create something exceptional, with or without Ms. Winters' support. Principal Howard's office door closed with a soft click as Ms. Winters settled into the chair across from his desk. The weekly department head meeting was about to begin, with Dr. Bennett from the science department already seated nearby. "Victoria, before we start, I wanted to check in about our new transfer student," Principal Howard said, adjusting his glasses. "Marcus Johnson. How is he adjusting?" Ms. Winters straightened her blazer, her posture rigid. "He seems determined to challenge authority at every turn. Refuses to sit down in class, constantly drawing attention to himself." Dr. Bennett frowned. "I've heard quite different reports from other teachers. Mr. Thompson says he's one of the most promising students he's seen in years." "Thompson has always had a soft spot for charity cases," Ms. Winters replied dismissively. "Standards matter, especially at Westlake. We can't lower our expectations simply because a student has a scholarship." Principal Howard studied her carefully. "Victoria, this is the third scholarship student in your classes who struggled in the past 2 years. The others transferred out after receiving failing grades despite excellent academic records elsewhere. Perhaps their previous schools were less rigorous," she suggested, her tone defensive. "I treat all students equally. If they can't meet the standards, that's hardly my responsibility." Dr. Bennett leaned forward. "I reviewed Tasha Williams' final project from last year after she transferred. It was exceptional work. Yet you gave her a D." "Her methodology was fundamentally flawed," Ms. Winters insisted. "I can't pass a student who doesn't understand basic concepts, regardless of how polished their presentation might be." "And Marcus Johnson?" Principal Howard asked. "What's your assessment of his abilities?" Ms. Winters waved a hand dismissively. "He's overconfident. Requested advanced lab equipment after just 1 week. Clearly trying to impress, but I doubt he has the foundation to succeed at the level he thinks he's at." Dr. Bennett's expression hardened. I'd like to review his project proposal myself. That would be highly irregular, Ms. Winters replied sharply. And undermines my authority as his teacher. Consider it a department-wide interest in quantum physics, Dr. Bennett said coolly. His topic sounds fascinating. Principal Howard cleared his throat. Victoria, I want to be clear, Westlake's commitment to diversity isn't just about admitting students from different backgrounds. It's about ensuring they have equal opportunities to succeed. Are you implying something about my teaching methods? Ms. Winters asked, her voice dangerously quiet. I'm stating that every student deserves fair evaluation, he replied evenly. The board is particularly interested in our scholarship students' progress this year. There will be additional oversight of grading across all departments. Ms. Winters' lips pressed into a thin line. Understood. As the meeting continued, she remained largely silent, her mind circling back to Marcus Johnson. Something about the boy's confidence irritated her deeply. Students like him needed to understand their place, particularly at an institution like Westlake. By the time she left the principal's office, her resolve had only strengthened. She would ensure Marcus Johnson received exactly the education he deserved. The advanced physics lab hummed with activity as students prepared for their experimental demonstrations. Despite Ms. Winters' initial reluctance, Dr. Bennett had intervened, granting Marcus access to the necessary equipment, though Ms. Winters had made it clear this was a one-time exception. Marcus stood at his assigned station, carefully aligning the laser apparatus for his quantum entanglement demonstration. His back had improved enough that he could sit for short periods, but he preferred standing while working with the delicate equipment. Nervous, scholarship boy. Jessica appeared beside him, her project on simple harmonic motion already neatly assembled. Quantum entanglement is way beyond high school level. Even Ms. Winters might be impressed if you pull it off. That's the plan, Marcus replied, focusing on his calibrations. Jessica lingered, watching his methodical adjustments. You actually seem to know what you're doing, she admitted, sounding almost disappointed. Before Marcus could respond, Ms. Winters called the class to attention. We'll proceed alphabetically. Each student has 5 minutes to demonstrate their experiment and explain their findings. As his classmates presented, Marcus noticed Ms. Winters' evaluations seemed predicated more on who was presenting than the quality of their work. Ryan's excellent electromagnetic demonstration received only cursory praise, while Jessica's relatively straightforward pendulum experiment was declared exemplary in both execution and analysis. When Marcus's turn approached, Ms. Winters checked her watch. I'm afraid we're running short on time. Mr. Johnson, since your setup is rather complex, perhaps you should observe today and present next class. But I'm ready now, Marcus objected. And I've already calibrated everything. The schedule is my decision, Ms. Winters replied firmly. Please step aside so we can continue with the remaining presentations. Marcus reluctantly moved to the back of the room, his carefully prepared experiment untested. As the final student finished, Marcus noticed something concerning about the chemical reaction demonstration being set up for the next class. Ms. Winters, he called out, the concentration values on that sodium solution seem incorrectly labeled. If they mix those as marked, Mr. Johnson, she interrupted sharply, since you weren't able to present your own experiment, perhaps you shouldn't criticize others. I'm not criticizing, Marcus persisted. But that concentration could cause. Enough. Ms. Winters silenced him. Class dismissed. As students gathered their materials, a small explosion sounded from the demonstration table, shattering a beaker. Students jumped back, thankfully unharmed, as Ms. Winters rushed to contain the situation. Ryan sidled up to Marcus. You called it. How did you know? The solution was too cloudy for the listed concentration, Marcus explained quietly. Basic chemical indicator. Ms. Winters overheard as she passed. Perhaps next time, Mr. Johnson, you'll find a more appropriate way to share your concerns rather than disrupting class. Several students exchanged incredulous glances, having witnessed Marcus's attempt to warn her. As they left the lab, Ryan shook his head. That was brutal. You literally tried to prevent that accident. Doesn't matter, Marcus replied, gathering his unused equipment. Some people see what they expect to see. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by notes and textbooks. The house was quiet except for the gentle humming of his mother in the living room, where she reviewed medical charts from the hospital where she worked as a nurse. "You're up late," Vanessa Johnson observed, pausing in the doorway with a cup of tea. "Still working on that physics project?" Marcus nodded, rubbing his eyes. "Ms. Winters wouldn't let me present today. I have to be ready for next class." Vanessa approached, studying the complex diagrams spread across the table. "This looks like your father's work," she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I wish Dad was here," Marcus admitted. "He'd know exactly how to explain this concept." "He'll be home from his research trip next month," Vanessa reminded him. "He's very proud of you, you know. Following in his footsteps at such a young age." Marcus sighed heavily. "Not sure how proud he'd be if he knew I was failing physics." His mother's expression sharpened. "Failing? With this level of work? That can't be right." "According to Ms. Winters, my methodology is fundamentally unsound and my theoretical framework lacks rigor," Marcus quoted bitterly. "Yet she won't specifically tell me what's wrong or let me demonstrate my experiment." Vanessa pulled out a chair and sat beside her son. "Marcus, is this about more than just the project? What's really going on at that school?" The composure Marcus had maintained for weeks finally cracked. He told his mother everything, the very first encounter that had injured his back, the daily humiliations, the impossible standards, the clear pattern of discrimination that no one seemed willing to address directly. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" Vanessa asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I wanted to handle it myself," Marcus replied. "I didn't want to be the scholarship kid who couldn't hack it without running to his parents." "There's a difference between asking for help and enduring injustice," his mother said firmly. "Your father didn't become Dr. Elijah Johnson by silently accepting discrimination. That's different. Dad's work on quantum field theory literally changed physics. He earned his respect. And he faced plenty of people like Ms. Winters along the way," Vanessa countered. "People who decided his brilliance was somehow threatening simply because of who he was." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling your father." "Mom, no." Marcus protested. "He's presenting at that international conference. This isn't important enough to disturb him." "Your education is exactly that important," she insisted, already dialing. As the phone rang, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. His father's quiet dignity had always been his model for handling difficult situations. What would he say about this? "Vanessa?" Dr. Johnson's voice came through the speaker. "Is everything all right? It's the middle of the night there." "Elijah, we need to discuss Marcus's situation at Westlake," she replied. "There's a teacher discriminating against him, and it's affecting his grades." There was a brief silence before Dr. Johnson spoke again, his voice calm but serious. "Tell me everything, son." As Marcus recounted the past weeks, he felt the burden he'd been carrying begin to lift. When he finished, his father's response was measured but resolute. "I'll make arrangements to return early," Dr. Johnson said. "Some things matter more than conferences, and this is one of them." "Dad, you don't have to." "Marcus," his father interrupted gently, "there are times to persevere silently, and times to stand up. You've done the former admirably. Now it's time for the latter." After the call ended, Marcus stared at his project notes, seeing them with fresh eyes. His father was right. He had been trying to prove himself on Ms. Winters' impossible terms instead of standing confidently in his own knowledge. "I think I've been approaching this all wrong," he told his mother, a new determination in his voice. "I've been trying to fit her expectations instead of demonstrating what I actually know." Vanessa smiled. "Now you're sounding like your father." For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt hopeful. Whatever came next, he would face it not as an apologetic scholarship student, but as Marcus Johnson, son of Dr. Elijah Johnson, yes, but more importantly, a physicist in his own right. The day of project submissions arrived with a tension Marcus could almost physically feel. He had completely reworked his approach, focusing on a theoretical model supported by his smaller-scale demonstration. The paper was the best work he'd ever produced, clear, innovative, and thorough. When he handed it to Ms. Winters, she barely glanced at it. "I'll review these over the weekend," she announced to the class. "Expect your grades on Monday." Monday came with a sense of foreboding. Ms. Winters entered the classroom with a stack of papers, her expression unreadable. "Overall, I'm pleased with the quality of work," she began, distributing graded projects. "Most of you demonstrated a solid understanding of the principles involved." She placed papers on desks as she moved through the room, occasionally commenting on particularly strong elements. When she reached Marcus, her lips thinned. "Mr. Johnson. A disappointing effort." She handed him his paper. A bold red F marked the cover page, alongside a brief comment, "Fails to demonstrate basic understanding of quantum principles. See me after class." Marcus stared at the grade in disbelief. He had triple-checked every equation, every citation, every conclusion. The work was beyond reproach, he knew it with absolute certainty. Ryan leaned over from the next desk. "That's impossible," he whispered, glancing at Marcus's paper. "Your work is college level." Ms. Winters overheard. "Mr. Davidson, focus on your own grade, not others." The remainder of class passed in a blur. When the bell rang, Marcus remained seated, actually seated, for the first time since the term began, his back pain now reduced to a dull ache. "You wanted to see me," he said when they were alone. Ms. Winters folded her hands on her desk. "Mr. Johnson, I had hoped you would rise to the challenge I presented, but this paper suggests you're out of your depth." "With all due respect," Marcus replied, struggling to keep his voice steady, "I believe my work meets or exceeds the requirements. Could you please explain specifically what's incorrect?" "Your entire theoretical framework misinterprets basic quantum concepts," she said dismissively. "The equations on page 4 alone contain multiple errors." Marcus flipped to page 4, where his perfectly accurate equations sat unchanged. "These are standard formulations from current quantum theory," he pointed out. "I can cite the textbooks they appear in." "Textbooks can be misinterpreted," Ms. Winters replied coldly. "Your scholarship may have gotten you into Westlake, Mr. Johnson, but it doesn't guarantee you'll succeed here. Some students simply aren't prepared for this level of rigor." The implication hung in the air between them. This wasn't about his work at all. "Is there any possibility of revising the project?" Marcus asked, knowing the answer but needing to exhaust all options. "The grade stands," she replied firmly. "I suggest you focus on improving your understanding of the fundamentals if you hope to pass this course." As Marcus gathered his belongings, a calm certainty settled over him. This was no longer about proving himself to Ms. Winters, that goal was clearly impossible. This was about justice. "I'll be discussing this with my parents," he said quietly. Something flickered across Ms. Winters' face, surprise, perhaps, or irritation at his persistence. "That's certainly your right," she responded. "Though I doubt they'll understand the complexities of quantum physics either." Marcus smiled faintly. "You might be surprised." Later that day, he called his mother during lunch break, his decision made. "Mom, I need Dad to come to the parent-teacher conference this Friday. Not just on the phone. In person." "He's flying back Thursday," Vanessa confirmed. "He's already scheduled a meeting with Principal Howard and requested to see all your work." For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt a weight lifting. Whatever happened next, the truth would finally come to light. The Johnson family living room was rarely so tense. Marcus sat between his parents on the sofa, his failed physics project spread out on the coffee table before them. Vanessa Johnson had already gone through it twice, her medical precision evident in the way she systematically checked each page. "There's nothing wrong with this work," she stated firmly, setting the paper down. "In fact, it's exceptional." Marcus ran a hand over his face. Try telling that to Ms. Winters. The video call on the laptop chimed, and Dr. Elijah Johnson's face appeared on screen. Despite being thousands of miles away at CERN, his presence immediately filled the room. "I can see you all," he confirmed, adjusting his camera. "Have you gone through the project?" "Yes," Vanessa replied. "It's exactly as Marcus described. There's no justification for the failing grade." Dr. Johnson nodded gravely. "Send me the scanned copy. I want to review it before Thursday." As Vanessa attached the document to an email, Dr. Johnson studied his son's face. "Marcus, I need you to tell me honestly, is this just about the project, or has there been a pattern?" Marcus hesitated, then spoke with careful precision, recounting the past months in detail: Ms. Winters' initial hostility, the standing issue, the systematic exclusion, the overheard comments about scholarship students, the impossibly high bar applied only to him. "She shoved you?" Dr. Johnson's normally calm voice rose sharply when Marcus mentioned the incident that had injured his back. "It was during orientation. She claimed it was an accident, but—" Marcus trailed off. "Did you report this?" his father demanded. "No. I had no witnesses, and it was my first day. I didn't want to start trouble." Dr. Johnson closed his eyes briefly, composing himself. "Son, demanding fair treatment isn't starting trouble. It's your right." A sharp knock at the front door interrupted them. Vanessa went to answer it, returning moments later with Ryan. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," Ryan said, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to check if Marcus was okay. He missed last period." "I had a doctor's appointment," Marcus explained, gesturing to the laptop. "Ryan, this is my father, Dr. Johnson." Ryan waved awkwardly at the screen. "Nice to meet you, sir." Dr. Johnson nodded. "I understand you're a classmate of Marcus's. What's your perspective on what's happening in Ms. Winters' class?" Ryan glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "Honestly, sir. It's been pretty obvious from day one. Ms. Winters treats Marcus differently than everyone else. His work is better than most of ours, definitely better than mine, but she finds reasons to criticize everything he does." "And the other students? They notice this too?" Dr. Johnson asked. "Everyone sees it," Ryan confirmed. "Even Jessica, she's usually Ms. Winters' favorite, said the failing grade was ridiculous after she saw Marcus's paper." Dr. Johnson was silent for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Marcus, I've changed my flight. I'll be arriving tomorrow night instead of Thursday." "Dad, you don't have to cut your work short. This is important work too," his father interrupted firmly. "Ryan, thank you for coming by. And for being a friend to my son." After Ryan left, Dr. Johnson outlined his plan. "I've already emailed Principal Howard requesting a meeting with the complete science department faculty, not just Ms. Winters. I'll need the contact information for Dr. Bennett as well." "What exactly are you planning?" Vanessa asked, recognizing the determined look in her husband's eyes. "A comprehensive review of Marcus's work, followed by a discussion about educational ethics," Dr. Johnson replied. "And perhaps a long overdue conversation about quantum entanglement theory." For the first time in weeks, Marcus smiled genuinely. "Ms. Winters has no idea who she's about to meet, does she?" "No," his father agreed, his expression serious despite the hint of satisfaction in his voice. "But it's time she learned." Principal Howard's office had never felt so small. Ms. Winters sat rigidly in one of the visitor chairs, her posture betraying none of the anxiety she felt. Across from her, Dr. Bennett from the science department leaned against the bookshelf, reviewing Marcus Johnson's failed project with deepening concern. "Victoria," Principal Howard began carefully, "I've received a rather strongly worded email from Dr. Elijah Johnson regarding his son's treatment in your class. He's arriving tomorrow for a full department meeting." Ms. Winters maintained her composed expression. "Parents often struggle to accept their children's academic shortcomings. I'm prepared to explain my grading rubric." Dr. Bennett looked up from the paper. "That might be challenging, considering there's nothing wrong with this project. In fact, it's remarkably sophisticated. With all due respect, Nathan, quantum entanglement is my specialty, not yours, Ms. Winters replied coolly. The theoretical framework is fundamentally flawed. Is it? Dr. Bennett challenged, turning the paper toward her. Because these equations align perfectly with current quantum theory. I checked them myself. Principal Howard sighed heavily. Victoria, this isn't the first time we've had this conversation. The pattern with scholarship students in your classes. I maintain the highest standards for all my students, she interrupted. The fact that scholarship students consistently fail to meet those standards suggests a problem with the selection process, not my teaching. Or perhaps, Dr. Bennett suggested quietly, it suggests unconscious bias. Ms. Winters stiffened. I resent that implication. Regardless, Principal Howard interjected, Dr. Johnson seems quite determined. He's requested copies of all Marcus's work, your grading rubrics, and the department's curriculum guidelines. He's welcome to review them, Ms. Winters replied confidently. I stand by my assessments. After the meeting, Ms. Winters retreated to her classroom, unsettled despite her outward confidence. She searched online for information about Marcus's parents, expecting to find the typical middle-class backgrounds of scholarship families. Vanessa Johnson appeared to be a nurse at Memorial Hospital, respectable but hardly intimidating. Elijah Johnson yielded more results, a physics professor at a historically black university. Ms. Winters relaxed slightly. A small university professor would hardly be equipped to challenge her expertise. She skimmed his faculty profile, noting his PhD from Stanford, which was moderately impressive. There was mention of research publications, but nothing she recognized from major journals. Satisfied that she could easily maintain intellectual dominance in tomorrow's meeting, she closed the browser without bothering to check his complete publication history or research focus. That evening, Dr. Bennett called an emergency department meeting without Ms. Winters. I've reviewed Marcus Johnson's complete work portfolio, he told the assembled science faculty. Not only is there nothing wrong with it, but it's extraordinary. The failing grade is indefensible. What about his father? Asked Ms. Rivera, the biology teacher. Principal Howard mentioned he's flying in specifically for this. Dr. Bennett's expression changed. I did some research after our meeting with Victoria. Dr. Elijah Johnson isn't just a physics professor. He's one of the leading researchers in quantum field theory. His work on entanglement has been published in Nature, Science, and multiple specialized journals. He's currently collaborating with researchers at CERN. A murmur went through the room. And Victoria failed his son on a quantum entanglement project? Mr. Thompson asked incredulously. Precisely, Dr. Bennett confirmed. I suspect tomorrow's meeting will be educational for everyone involved. As the faculty dispersed, Dr. Bennett lingered in the empty classroom, troubled by the implications. Marcus Johnson's situation raised serious questions about systemic issues at Westlake, questions that could no longer be ignored, regardless of the outcome of tomorrow's confrontation. The conference room buzzed with tension. On one side of the long table sat Ms. Winters, ramrod straight, with Principal Howard and Dr. Bennett flanking her. Across from them, Marcus sat between his parents, his expression carefully neutral despite the churning in his stomach. Thank you all for meeting on such short notice, Principal Howard began. We're here to discuss Marcus Johnson's academic standing in AP Physics, specifically regarding his recent project grade. Ms. Winters spoke immediately. I've brought copies of my grading rubric and examples of A-level work for comparison, she said, sliding folders across the table. While I understand parental concern, I assure you my assessment was fair and consistent with department standards. Vanessa Johnson didn't touch the folder. Before we discuss grading standards, I'd like to address the pattern of treatment my son has experienced since his first day. Ms. Winters' smile tightened. I maintain the same high expectations for all students, Mrs. Johnson. Westlake's reputation depends on academic excellence. Excellence should be recognized, not suppressed, Vanessa replied evenly. Principal Howard cleared his throat. Perhaps we should focus on the specific project concerns. Dr. Johnson, I understand you have expertise in this area. For the first time since they'd entered, Elijah Johnson spoke. His voice was quiet but carried an undeniable authority that immediately commanded the room's attention. Yes, quantum physics has been my research focus for the past 20 years, he said. I've reviewed my son's project thoroughly. Not only is it conceptually sound, but it demonstrates an understanding of quantum entanglement that would be impressive at the graduate level. Ms. Winter's expression remained confident. With all due respect, Dr. Johnson, teaching physics at the university level is quite different from evaluating high school work. The equations on page 4 contain fundamental misinterpretations of. The equations on page 4, Dr. Johnson interrupted gently, are derived from the Bell inequality experiments, modified to demonstrate non-local correlation without paradox. They're perfectly accurate. Ms. Winters blinked, momentarily thrown. Well, the theoretical framework uses the decoherence approach to measurement, which is currently the prevailing model at CERN, Dr. Johnson continued, his tone remaining conversational. Where exactly do you see the error? The room fell silent as Ms. Winters stared at him, clearly reassessing her initial assumptions about this university professor. Dr. Bennett leaned forward. Ms. Winters, perhaps you could point to the specific passages you found problematic? Ms. Winters flipped through the paper, her confidence visibly faltering. The approach is unconventional for high school level work, she finally managed. Unconventional doesn't mean incorrect, Dr. Johnson observed. Innovation should be encouraged, not penalized. Principal Howard turned to Ms. Winters. Victoria, you specifically cited errors in the equations and theoretical framework. If you can't identify those errors now, I'd like to know, Marcus spoke up, his voice surprisingly steady, is the issue with my work, or with me? Ms. Winters stiffened. I don't appreciate what you're implying. Then let me be direct, Dr. Johnson said, his calm demeanor unchanging despite the intensity of his gaze. My son has been systematically excluded, his work undervalued, and his physical pain dismissed in your classroom. I'm trying to understand why a teacher would fail a paper that demonstrates exceptional understanding of the subject. Who exactly are you to question my expertise? Ms. Winters demanded, her composure finally cracking. Dr. Johnson's expression remained impassive as he reached into his briefcase and removed a scientific journal, sliding it across the table. His name was prominently displayed on the cover as lead author of the featured article, an article on quantum entanglement theory. I'm the person whose work you've been teaching for the past 5 years, he said quietly. The textbook you use cites my research 13 times. The quantum entanglement model you consider the standard was developed in my lab. Ms. Winters' face drained of color as she stared at the journal, then at Dr. Johnson, comprehension dawning too late. Dr. Elijah Johnson, Principal Howard explained unnecessarily, is one of the leading researchers in quantum physics worldwide. I didn't, Ms. Winters began, then stopped, clearly recalibrating. I was unaware of your specific contributions to the field. Clearly, Dr. Johnson replied. Though I'm more concerned about your unawareness of the excellence in my son's work, regardless of who his father might be. The remaining pretense of professional evaluation crumbled as Ms. Winters realized the full extent of her miscalculation. She had failed the son of a preeminent physicist on his father's own theories. The science department conference room had transformed into an impromptu academic review panel. Dr. Johnson stood at the whiteboard, elegantly explaining the finer points of Marcus's quantum entanglement project to an audience of fascinated faculty members. Ms. Winters sat silently in the corner, her usual confidence notably absent. As you can see, Dr. Johnson concluded, circling a final equation, Marcus's approach demonstrates not only a thorough understanding of current theory but also introduces an innovative perspective on measurement that addresses several ongoing debates in the field. Dr. Bennett nodded enthusiastically. This is genuinely publishable work, Marcus. Have you considered submitting it to the Young Physicists Journal? Before Marcus could answer, Principal Howard steered the conversation back to the immediate issue. Given this review, I believe we need to reconsider the grade assigned to this project. Absolutely, Dr. Bennett agreed. This clearly merits the highest possible grade. All eyes turned to Ms. Winters, who shifted uncomfortably. In light of additional expert input, I'm willing to reassess the grade. That's generous, Vanessa Johnson remarked, her tone making it clear she found it anything but. And what about the pattern of treatment leading up to this point? Principal Howard folded his hands. Rest assured, Mrs. Johnson, this situation will be addressed comprehensively. The board takes allegations of discriminatory grading extremely seriously. Allegations? Dr. Johnson questioned quietly. I believe we've moved well beyond allegations at this point. Ms. Winters finally spoke up. I maintain that I hold all students to the same rigorous standards. If Marcus felt singled out, that wasn't my intention. Intentions aren't always reflected in actions, Dr. Johnson replied. When multiple scholarship students, predominantly students of color, fail your class despite excelling elsewhere, that pattern demands examination. Principal Howard nodded gravely. A formal review process will begin immediately. In the meantime, Ms. Winters will be placed on administrative leave pending the investigation's findings. Ms. Winters paled. Administrative leave? But we're mid-semester. Dr. Bennett will oversee your classes temporarily, Principal Howard explained. To ensure continuity for all students. As the meeting adjourned, Ms. Winters approached Marcus and his parents, her manner strained but determined. Dr. Johnson, I want to assure you that I never intended. Ms. Winters, Dr. Johnson interrupted gently, what matters isn't what you intended, but what you did. My son came to this school eager to learn, and instead was made to feel unwelcome and inferior. That harm is real, regardless of your intentions. Marcus watched his father, absorbing the lesson in dignity and directness. What happens now? Marcus asked as they left the conference room. Principal Howard, walking alongside them, sighed heavily. A full review of Ms. Winters' grading practices over the past 3 years. Interviews with current and former students. And for you, Marcus, a fresh start with Dr. Bennett supervising your work directly. And the other scholarship students who transferred? Vanessa asked. We'll be contacting them as part of the investigation, Principal Howard assured her. This situation has revealed systemic issues we need to address institution-wide. As they reached the school entrance, Marcus spotted Ryan waiting anxiously by the steps. How did it go? His friend asked immediately. Marcus glanced at his parents, then back to Ryan. Let's just say Ms. Winters got an unexpected physics lesson today. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Westlake Academy buzzed with change. The school board's emergency meeting had resulted in a comprehensive review of all departments' grading practices and a new oversight committee focused on equitable education. Ms. Winters remained on administrative leave, her return uncertain as previous students came forward with similar experiences. For Marcus, the most immediate change was in the classroom. Dr. Bennett had taken over the AP Physics class, bringing a refreshing enthusiasm and genuine engagement with all students. Today, Dr. Bennett announced, we have a special guest lecturer on quantum entanglement. Please welcome Dr. Elijah Johnson. Marcus couldn't help smiling as his father entered the classroom to surprised murmurs. Even Jessica looked impressed. Thank you for having me, Dr. Johnson began. Before I start, I want to commend all of you on your excellent work this semester. I've had the privilege of reviewing your projects, and I'm genuinely impressed by your grasp of complex concepts. For the next hour, the class remained spellbound as Dr. Johnson explained quantum entanglement with remarkable clarity, making the abstract theory accessible without oversimplification. When he invited questions, every hand shot up, including Jessica's. By the end of the session, the shift in classroom dynamics was palpable. Students who had previously ignored Marcus now sought his insights, having recognized the depth of his understanding. As the bell rang, Dr. Bennett approached Marcus. Your revised grade has been officially recorded. I've also nominated your paper for the National Young Scientists competition. Thank you, Marcus replied, still adjusting to this new reality where his work was not just accepted but celebrated. Outside the classroom, Ryan waited with a broad grin. Your dad is amazing. I actually understand quantum entanglement now. He has that effect on people, Marcus agreed. Listen, Ryan said, growing serious, I wanted to apologize for not speaking up sooner about how Ms. Winters was treating you. I knew it was wrong, but... You were the only one who did anything, Marcus interrupted. That matters. Later that day, Principal Howard called Marcus and his parents into his office, where the chair of the school board waited to address them personally. The board wants to extend our sincere apologies for your experience, Marcus, she said solemnly. Your case has prompted a long overdue examination of practices that have too often gone unchallenged. Will there be changes? Dr. Johnson asked. Significant ones, the chair confirmed. We're implementing anti-bias training for all faculty, reviewing our scholarship program to ensure proper support systems, and establishing a diverse student-faculty committee to advise on inclusivity initiatives. As they left the administration building, Marcus paused by the physics lab, now a place of discovery rather than dread. I was afraid coming forward would just label me as a troublemaker, he admitted to his father. That I'd prove people right who thought I didn't belong here. Dr. Johnson placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Standing up against injustice is never wrong, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. Like quantum entanglement, Marcus mused. One action affecting another across space. His father smiled. Exactly. The connections between us matter, the seen and unseen alike. Remember that, son. Your presence here has already changed this place for the better. As they walked toward the exit, Marcus stood tall, no longer worried about his posture or pain or perception. For the first time since arriving at Westlake, he moved through the hallways with the certainty that he belonged, not because of who his father was, but because of who he himself had proven to be. Dear friend, this story reminds us that bias in education doesn't just hurt individuals, it robs society of brilliant contributions. Every student deserves to be judged solely on their work, not on preconceived notions about who belongs where. When we stand up against discrimination, we create ripples that transform institutions. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that challenge prejudice and celebrate resilience. Your support helps us continue sharing these essential stories that need to be told. Together, we can build a more just and inclusive world. People like you should know their place, Victoria spat, looking Elijah up and down with undisguised contempt. What happens when a wealthy family's daughter catches the maid's son playing her expensive piano? How will a mother's discovery of his hidden talent change everything they thought they knew about privilege, potential, and the power of music to bridge worlds? Will Elijah's extraordinary gift overcome generations of injustice, or will system that once punished him for merely touching a piano continue to hold him back? Don't miss this heartwarming story of talent discovered in the most unexpected places. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The Hartwell mansion stood tall against the morning sun, its pristine white pillars gleaming like sentinels at the entrance. Martha Johnson sighed as she adjusted her maid's uniform, her calloused hands smoothing down the fabric. At 45, her face showed the wear of years of hard work, but her eyes remained bright with determination. Elijah, baby, you don't have to come with me today. You should be resting, Martha said, glancing worriedly at her 17-year-old son. Elijah shook his head, wincing slightly as he straightened his back. It's fine, Mom. I'd rather be with you than alone at home. Martha frowned, the memory of last week's phone call from school still fresh in her mind. Ms. Reynolds, that strict music teacher, had struck Elijah across his back with a ruler when he'd sat at a piano without permission. Now, her son couldn't even sit properly without pain shooting through his spine. That woman had no right, Martha muttered under her breath. It's okay, Mom. It'll heal, Elijah said with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. As they entered through the service entrance, the magnificent sounds of Chopin filled the air. The Hartwell's daughter, Victoria, was practicing again. Martha watched as Elijah's face transformed, his pain momentarily forgotten as the music washed over him. His fingers unconsciously moved at his sides, mirroring the complex patterns of notes. Martha had noticed this since he was small, this connection to music that seemed almost magical. But lessons were expensive, and pianos were for people like the Hartwells, not for the son of a single mother who cleaned houses for a living. "Remember, don't disturb Miss Victoria or touch anything in the music room," she reminded him gently. Elijah nodded, but his eyes remained fixed in the direction of the music, drawn like a moth to flame. Victoria Hartwell's fingers danced across the ivory keys of the Steinway grand piano that dominated the music room. At 18, she was the epitome of privilege, long blonde hair falling in perfect waves, designer clothes that had never known a discount rack, and a confidence that came from never being told no. "Wonderful playing, Miss Victoria," Martha said as she entered to dust the room, keeping her eyes respectfully lowered. Victoria barely acknowledged her, continuing her practiced routine of Chopin's Nocturne. "My recital is in 2 weeks. I need absolute quiet while I practice." From the doorway, Elijah watched, transfixed. His back throbbed, forcing him to stand straight rather than lean against the doorframe, but he couldn't tear himself away from the music. Victoria was technically proficient, he noted, but something was missing, the emotion, the soul of the piece remained untouched. Richard Hartwell strode past, his tailored suit and polished shoes a stark contrast to Elijah's worn jeans and faded t-shirt. He barely glanced at Martha, merely nodding curtly before addressing his daughter. "Victoria, darling, remember the Carmichaels are coming for dinner tonight. Wear the blue dress I bought you from Paris." "Yes, Daddy," Victoria replied, her playing never faltering. Richard turned and finally noticed Elijah. "Why is there a boy here?" he asked, not addressing Elijah directly but looking at Martha. "My apologies, Mr. Hartwell. This is my son, Elijah. He's recovering from an injury and couldn't be left alone today," Martha explained, nervousness evident in her voice. Richard frowned. "Keep him out of the way. And make sure he doesn't touch anything." "Yes, sir," Martha replied, a flash of hurt crossing her face before she composed herself. As Richard left, Victoria smirked at Elijah before returning to her playing, deliberately increasing her volume as if to emphasize the gulf between them, she, the talented pianist with the world at her fingertips, and he, the maid's son, allowed in the house only by grudging tolerance. Elijah felt his cheeks burn with humiliation, but he remained standing, listening, his fingers silently playing along at his sides, catching corrections to her interpretation that she'd never hear from him. 3 days later, Elijah found himself alone in the magnificent music room. His mother was outside tending to the garden, and Victoria was at her weekly tennis lesson. The house was quiet, save for the distant sound of the gardener's mower. The grand piano stood in the center of the room, sunlight streaming through tall windows to illuminate it like a shrine. Elijah circled it reverently, his fingertips hovering just above the polished black surface without touching it. "Just one note," he whispered to himself, glancing nervously at the door. His finger pressed down on a single key, the perfect middle C resonating through the room. The sound hung in the air like a question waiting to be answered. Before he could stop himself, his other fingers joined in, finding their places naturally despite having never taken a formal lesson in his life. The pain in his back seemed to recede as he lost himself in Chopin's Nocturne, the same piece Victoria had been practicing, but transformed. Where her playing had been technically correct but emotionally vacant, Elijah's fingers coaxed the soul from the keys, each note carrying the weight of dreams deferred and passions hidden. So absorbed was he in the music that he didn't hear the front door open, didn't notice the footsteps approaching until it was too late. "What do you think you're doing?" Victoria's shrill voice sliced through the music like a knife. Elijah jumped up from the bench, pain shooting through his back as he moved too quickly. I'm sorry, I was just what? Touching my piano with your dirty hands?" Victoria advanced into the room, her face contorted with rage and something else. Was it fear? "How dare you? Do you know how much this costs? More than your mother makes in a year." Elijah stepped back, his face burning with shame. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean any harm." "People like you should know their place," Victoria spat, looking him up and down with undisguised contempt. "What makes you think you have any right to touch something so fine? This piano is for people with real talent, people who matter. Not for the helps brat who doesn't even know how to sit properly in class." Elijah felt each word like a physical blow. Somehow Victoria knew about his humiliation at school, about Ms. Reynolds' cruel punishment. "My mother cleans your toilets," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with malice. "Remember that before you get ideas above your station." As if summoned by her daughter's raised voice, Martha appeared at the doorway, her face falling as she took in the scene. "Elijah? What happened?" "Your son was pawing at my piano," Victoria said before Elijah could respond. "Make sure it doesn't happen again, or I'll have to tell my father." Martha's face paled, knowing what that could mean for her job, the only thing keeping a roof over their heads. "It won't happen again, Miss Victoria. I promise." As Martha led him from the room, Elijah caught a final glimpse of the piano. Despite Victoria's cruel words, despite the renewed pain in his back, he could still feel the keys beneath his fingers, still hear the music in his head. Nobody, not even Victoria Hartwell, could take that away from him. Monday morning arrived with dread hanging over Elijah like a storm cloud. His back still ached from Ms. Reynolds' discipline, making sitting in hard school chairs an exercise in torture. As he entered the music appreciation classroom, he saw her watching him with narrowed eyes, daring him to make a scene. "Mr. Johnson, take your seat," Ms. Reynolds commanded, her thin lips barely moving. "Ma'am, my back," Elijah began. "I said sit down," she cut him off. "Unless you have a doctor's note, which I highly doubt." The class tittered with nervous laughter. Elijah remained standing near his desk, face burning with humiliation. "Stubborn and disrespectful," Ms. Reynolds declared to the class. "This is what happens when students don't know their place." From the front row, Victoria Hartwell turned to give him a smug smile. Of course she'd be here, music appreciation was an easy A for someone with her training. Her presence made his humiliation complete. Elijah. Mr. Davis, the school's music teacher, appeared at the classroom door. "May I borrow him for a moment, Ms. Reynolds?" Before she could protest, Mr. Davis had ushered Elijah into the hallway. The older black man's kind eyes crinkled with concern. "I heard what happened last week," he said quietly. "Is your back still bothering you?" Elijah nodded, fighting back tears of relief at this small kindness. "I have an ergonomic cushion in my classroom. Use it today, and I'll write you a note for tomorrow. No one should have to stand through class." "Thank you, sir." As they walked to Mr. Davis's room, the teacher asked casually, "I hear you have quite an ear for music. Ever considered lessons?" Elijah laughed bitterly. "Not really in the cards for me, sir." Mr. Davis nodded thoughtfully. "There are scholarships, you know. For talented kids without means." For a moment, hope flickered in Elijah's chest, but reality quickly extinguished it. Who would recommend him? Who would even believe in his ability? Later that day, a sleek car pulled up to the school. Elizabeth Hartwell stepped out, elegant in her casual designer wear. Unlike her daughter and husband, Elizabeth had always treated Martha with respect, and now her eyes lingered curiously on Elijah as he stood rather than sat on a bench during lunch period. "That's Martha's son," Victoria supplied with practiced disdain. "He refuses to sit like a normal person. Always needs special attention." Elizabeth's eyes narrowed slightly at her daughter's tone. "Perhaps he has a good reason," she said, watching Elijah more closely than Victoria found comfortable. Elizabeth Hartwell had not always been a wealthy man's wife. Before marrying Richard, she had been Elizabeth Morgan, a promising concert pianist whose career was cut short by a wrist injury. Now, as she supervised Martha's cleaning of the music room, she found herself reflecting on the passion she once had for her art. "Your son, Elijah, he seems like a thoughtful young man," Elizabeth commented as Martha polished the piano. Martha's hand stilled. "He is, ma'am. Smart too. Could have gone to any college with a scholarship if. She trailed off. If. Elizabeth prompted gently. Martha sighed. If we had the money for the applications, for the right clothes for interviews, for all the things that make doors open easier. Elizabeth nodded, understanding more than Martha realized. She had noticed Elijah's peculiar stance at school, the way he avoided sitting down. I couldn't help but notice he seems to be in pain. Martha's eyes shone with unshed tears. That teacher, Ms. Reynolds, she hit him with a ruler across his back when he sat at the classroom piano without permission. Just wanted to try the keys, he said. Now he can barely sit without hurting. Elizabeth's face darkened. That's unconscionable. Has he seen a doctor? Martha shook her head. Our insurance has a high deductible. I'm saving up, but. I've seen how he watches Victoria play, Elizabeth said, changing the subject. Does he have an interest in music? Always has, Martha replied, a hint of pride breaking through her worry. Hums complex melodies he's only heard once. Somehow knows when notes aren't right. But lessons, instruments, these things aren't for families like ours. Elizabeth's gaze drifted to the piano, an idea forming in her mind. Perhaps there was more to Martha's son than met the eye. Elizabeth arranged everything carefully. Richard was away on business, Victoria was at her friend's house preparing for an upcoming recital. The house staff had been given the afternoon off, all except Martha, who was working in the guest quarters on the opposite wing. Elijah, Elizabeth called as she spotted the boy helping his mother carry cleaning supplies. Would you mind helping me with something in the music room? Martha gave an encouraging nod, and Elijah followed Elizabeth, his posture stiff from both pain and nervousness. The music room was bathed in golden afternoon light. Elizabeth sat on the small settee near the window rather than the piano bench. Do you play? She asked directly. Elijah's eyes widened. No, ma'am. I've never had lessons. That's not what I asked, Elizabeth said with gentle firmness. Victoria mentioned finding you at the piano last week. Elijah looked down, shame coloring his cheeks. I'm sorry about that. I shouldn't have touched it without permission. The piano is an instrument meant to be played, Elizabeth said, surprising him. Would you play something for me now? With my permission? Elijah remained frozen, his eyes darting between her and the magnificent instrument. I won't tell Victoria, Elizabeth promised with a small smile. This is between us. Slowly, as if approaching a wild animal that might bolt, Elijah made his way to the piano. He hesitated before sitting on the bench, wincing slightly as his back protested. Your back still hurts, Elizabeth observed. It's better than it was, he lied. His fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before descending. The first few notes were tentative, uncertain. But then, like a dam breaking, music flooded the room. Debussy's Clair de Lune, played not with the technical precision of years of training but with raw, intuitive emotion that took Elizabeth's breath away. Elijah's eyes closed as his fingers found their way across the keys as if guided by some invisible force. The piece transformed under his touch, becoming something new yet faithful to its essence. When the final notes faded, silence hung in the air like a held breath. Elizabeth found herself speechless. In 30 years of music, first as a performer and then as a patron, she had rarely encountered such natural, untrained talent. How, she finally managed. How do you play like that without lessons? Elijah's hands retreated to his lap. I just hear it. In my head. I watch videos online sometimes, when we have internet. And I practice on paper keyboards I draw. Paper keyboards, Elizabeth repeated, her voice thick with emotion. Miss Hartwell, please don't tell Victoria or Mr. Hartwell. My mom needs this job, and, Elijah, Elizabeth interrupted, what happened to you, both the incident with Ms. Reynolds and Victoria's behavior, was wrong. Deeply wrong. She stood, decision made. I'd like to help you, if you'll let me. Help me? Confusion crossed his face. "You have a rare gift," she said simply. "And I know someone who can help develop it properly. Someone who might also help us address the injustice you've experienced." For the first time since she'd met him, Elizabeth saw hope kindle in Elijah's eyes, fragile, cautious, but unmistakably there. "Will you trust me?" she asked. After a moment's hesitation, Elijah nodded, unaware that this simple gesture would change the course of his life forever. Elizabeth Hartwell arrived at Westridge Academy precisely at 10 a.m., dressed in the subtle signifiers of wealth that ensured immediate respect. The school secretary, initially dismissive, quickly changed her tone upon recognizing Elizabeth's name. "Mrs. Hartwell. What an unexpected pleasure. How can we help you today?" "I'd like to speak with Mr. Davis, the music teacher, and afterward with Ms. Reynolds." Minutes later, Elizabeth sat across from Daniel Davis in his modest classroom. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment, Mr. Davis. I'm here about Elijah Johnson." Mr. Davis's expression warmed. "Elijah? Remarkable young man. His understanding of music theory exceeds many of my advanced students, despite never having formal training." "You've noticed his talent then?" Elizabeth asked. "Impossible not to," Mr. Davis confirmed. "I've tried encouraging him toward scholarships, but—" He hesitated. "But what?" "There have been obstacles. Not of Elijah's making." Elizabeth leaned forward. "You mean Ms. Reynolds?" Mr. Davis's silence was confirmation enough. "Tell me about the incident with the ruler," Elizabeth pressed. Mr. Davis sighed deeply. "Ms. Reynolds has traditional views about discipline and about which students deserve opportunities. When Elijah touched the classroom piano without permission, she struck him across the lower back with a wooden ruler. School policy prohibits corporal punishment, but Elijah never reported it officially, fearing retaliation." Elizabeth's jaw tightened. "And the principal?" "Tends to support faculty over students, especially when the student is." Mr. Davis trailed off. "Black?" Elizabeth finished for him. Mr. Davis nodded grimly. "Unfortunately, yes." "Thank you for your candor," Elizabeth said, rising. "One more question, do you know Dr. James Williams from the conservatory?" Mr. Davis's eyes widened. "The James Williams?" "Of course, though only by reputation." "I'll be speaking with him about Elijah," Elizabeth said. "I may need your support." Next, Elizabeth confronted Ms. Reynolds, whose smug superiority crumbled under Elizabeth's cold questioning and veiled threats of legal action. By the time Elizabeth left the school, the music teacher was pale and defensive, realizing too late the power of the woman she'd provoked. Elizabeth's final call of the day was to an old friend, Dr. James Williams, renowned pianist and head of the prestigious Williams Conservatory of Music. "James, I've found someone extraordinary. A boy with raw talent like I haven't seen in decades. But he needs your expert assessment, and perhaps your help with a situation of injustice." The Hartwell breakfast room was tense the following Saturday morning. Elizabeth had barely touched her food, her mind on the day ahead. Across from her, Victoria toyed with her fruit salad while Richard scanned financial news on his tablet. "I still don't understand why the cleaning woman's son is coming here on a weekend," Victoria complained. "And why you invited some professor to hear him play my piano." "Dr. Williams is hardly some professor," Elizabeth corrected. "He's one of the most respected pianists and music educators in the country." Richard lowered his tablet. "Elizabeth, I've indulged this project of yours, but I'm concerned you're overstepping. The boy is the maid's son. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish?" Before Elizabeth could answer, Martha and Elijah arrived at the service entrance. Martha had dressed Elijah in his best clothes, clean jeans and a button-down shirt she'd ironed to perfection. The sight of them, trying so hard with so little, strengthened Elizabeth's resolve. "Mrs. Hartwell, are you sure about this?" Martha whispered when Victoria and Richard had left the room. "If this goes badly—" "It won't," Elizabeth assured her, though anxiety fluttered in her stomach. So much depended on today. Meanwhile, in another part of town, Ms. Reynolds paced her living room, phone pressed to her ear. "Principal Edwards, I'm telling you, Elizabeth Hartwell was asking questions, pointed questions about the Johnson boy and about me. She mentioned lawyers." At the school, Mr. Davis was also making calls, reaching out to former students who'd encountered similar treatment from Ms. Reynolds. If Elizabeth Hartwell was building a case, he wanted to ensure she had all the evidence she needed. Back at the mansion, the doorbell rang precisely at noon. Dr. James Williams stood on the doorstep, tall, distinguished, with gray at his temples and keen intelligence in his eyes. Elizabeth herself opened the door, breaking protocol to greet her old friend. "James, thank you for coming." "Your message intrigued me," he replied. "You know, I've heard many undiscovered prodigies over the years. Most are merely enthusiastic amateurs. This is different," Elizabeth promised. "You'll see." In the music room, Elijah stood rigid with nervousness, his mother's hand on his shoulder. When Dr. Williams entered, Elijah recognized him immediately from YouTube videos he'd watched in the public library. His eyes widened with awe. "You're Dr. Williams. You performed Rachmaninoff's Third at Carnegie Hall 3 years ago." Dr. Williams raised an eyebrow, impressed by the recognition. "I did indeed. Elizabeth tells me you play." "Not really, sir. Not properly. I've never had lessons." "Let me be the judge of what's proper," Dr. Williams said kindly. "Would you play something for me? Anything you choose." As Elijah settled at the piano, Martha moved to stand beside Elizabeth, both women watching with bated breath. From the doorway, unseen by the others, Victoria observed with narrowed eyes, drawn by curiosity despite herself. When Elijah began to play Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, time seemed to stop. His technique was unorthodox, self-taught, yet somehow he captured the emotional heart of the piece with an authenticity that formal training sometimes sacrificed. Dr. Williams's expression transformed from polite interest to astonishment, then to something deeper, recognition of a kindred spirit in music. When the final notes faded, silence filled the room until Dr. Williams spoke quietly. "Young man, where did you learn to play like that?" Elijah's fingers trembled slightly over the keys as he prepared to play his second piece. Dr. Williams had requested Bach after the Chopin, wanting to test the limits of his untrained abilities. The technical demands were different, the emotional architecture more complex. "Take your time," Dr. Williams said kindly. "Bach isn't going anywhere." From her position near the door, Martha watched her son with a mixture of terror and pride. They were so far from their normal world here, balanced on a knife's edge of possibility. One wrong note, one misstep, and this chance could vanish. Elizabeth stood beside her, a steady presence. "Breathe, Martha," she whispered. "He's extraordinary, and James can see it." As Elijah began to play the prelude in C major, his posture changed. The pain in his back seemed forgotten as he lost himself in the mathematical precision of Bach, finding the hidden poetry within the structure. Despite his lack of formal training, his innate understanding of the music shone through, an understanding that couldn't be taught, only nurtured. Dr. Williams leaned forward, his expression intense. Occasionally he nodded or closed his eyes, absorbing every nuance of Elijah's interpretation. When the piece concluded, he stood and approached the piano. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the bench. Elijah moved aside, and Dr. Williams sat down, his posture perfect from decades of training. "Watch my hands," he instructed, playing a passage from the piece Elijah had just finished. "See how I position my wrist? Try that." For 15 minutes, they worked side by side, Dr. Williams offering small corrections, Elijah absorbing the guidance like a sponge in water. It wasn't a formal lesson, but something more profound, a master recognizing potential and offering the key to unlock it. Finally, Dr. Williams turned to Elizabeth and Martha. "I've heard enough." Martha's heart sank, fearing the worst. "Mrs. Johnson," Dr. Williams continued, "your son has the most natural musical ability I've encountered in 30 years of teaching. His technique needs refinement, certainly, but his musical intuition, that cannot be taught. It's innate. Elijah hears the music as it was meant to be heard. Martha covered her mouth with her hand, tears filling her eyes. What does this mean? Elizabeth asked, though she already knew. It means, Dr. Williams said, looking directly at Elijah, that I would like to offer you a full scholarship to the preparatory program at the Williams Conservatory. Weekly lessons with me personally, theory classes, ensemble work, everything you need to develop your gift properly. Elijah stood frozen, unable to process the words. But, how? I have school, and my back. Your back needs medical attention, Dr. Williams said firmly. Elizabeth has already spoken to me about that. As for school, our program works with students' academic schedules. Many of our most promising students come from diverse backgrounds, Elijah. You would not be alone. Mom. Elijah turned to Martha, seeking guidance in this unfamiliar territory. Martha stepped forward, her voice steady despite her tears. This is your chance, baby. The one I always prayed would come. As they discussed logistics, none of them noticed Victoria slipping away from the doorway, her face contorted with complex emotions, jealousy, confusion, and something that might, with time, become regret. The Hartwell household exploded in conflict that evening after Dr. Williams departed. Victoria stormed into the family room where Elizabeth sat with Richard, her face flushed with indignation. You're helping him take my place, she accused, pointing a finger at her mother. That scholarship should have been mine. I'm the one with years of training. Elizabeth remained calm. The scholarship wasn't mine to give, Victoria. Dr. Williams made his assessment based solely on talent. Talent? Victoria scoffed. He's the maid's son. He probably learned by eavesdropping on my practice sessions. Richard, who had been processing the day's events in silence, finally spoke. Elizabeth, I have to question your judgment here. Getting involved with the Helps family, bringing strangers into our home, what were you thinking? I was thinking, Elizabeth replied with steel in her voice, that extraordinary talent deserves nurturing, regardless of whose child possesses it. The argument might have continued, but they were interrupted by the arrival of Martha and Elijah, who had been summoned back to the house. Martha's expression was worried, Elijah's guarded. You wanted to see us, Mrs. Hartwell? Martha asked. Victoria immediately rounded on Elijah. You think you're so special now, don't you? With your fancy scholarship and Dr. Williams's praise. But you'll never belong in that world. You'll always be the boy whose mother scrubs our toilets. Victoria. Elizabeth gasped, horrified by her daughter's cruelty. But Martha stepped forward, years of deference falling away as she defended her son. My boy has a gift from God, Miss Victoria. A gift no amount of money could buy. I may clean your toilets, but I raised a son who understands that true worth isn't in what you own, but in what you give to the world. Richard watched this exchange with growing discomfort. He'd always seen Martha as part of the background of his life, a necessary service provider rather than a person with hopes and dreams and a brilliant son. Mr. Hartwell, Martha continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart, I've worked for your family for 8 years. I've been punctual, thorough, and respectful. But I cannot continue to work in a home where my son is treated this way. Elizabeth intervened before Richard could respond. Martha, please don't make any hasty decisions. There's something else we need to discuss. She turned to her husband and daughter. I visited Westridge Academy yesterday. What I learned about Ms. Reynolds's treatment of Elijah was disturbing. She struck him with a ruler, hard enough to cause lasting pain, simply for touching a piano. Victoria's expression faltered, her certainty shaken. He was probably breaking rules. The rules, Elizabeth cut in, do not permit physical punishment. Ever. Ms. Reynolds has a history of targeting certain students, primarily students of color, for harsher treatment. Mr. Davis confirmed it, and I've spoken with other parents as well. Richard's businessman instincts kicked in as he recognized potential liability. If what you're saying is true, that teacher should be fired. My thoughts exactly, Elizabeth agreed. But there's more. The school has systematically overlooked these complaints. They're facing potential legal action from multiple families, unless changes are made immediately. Victoria looked between her parents, her world tilting. But Ms. Reynolds said Elijah was disruptive, that he lied. Elijah spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but firm. I didn't. I never reported her because who would believe me over her? But I didn't lie. The room fell silent as Victoria truly looked at Elijah, perhaps for the first time seeing not the maid's son, but a talented young man who had suffered an injustice she unwittingly perpetuated. Richard cleared his throat. Martha, Elijah, please accept our apologies for how you've been treated. Elizabeth is right, talent should be nurtured wherever it's found. And injustice should be corrected. It was a beginning, faltering and imperfect, but a beginning nonetheless. 6 weeks later, the recital hall at the Williams Conservatory of Music buzzed with anticipation. In the front row sat Martha Johnson in a new dress, nervous but proud. Beside her, Elizabeth Hartwell maintained a dignified calm, though her eyes sparkled with satisfaction. Richard and Victoria Hartwell occupied the seats next to her, both looking somewhat uncomfortable but present nonetheless. Principal Edwards from Westridge Academy had also been persuaded to attend, after significant pressure from the school board following Elizabeth's evidence of Ms. Reynolds's misconduct. The music teacher herself was conspicuously absent, having been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. Mr. Davis sat with several students who had come to support Elijah, their presence a quiet rebellion against years of unspoken hierarchies at the school. Dr. Williams stepped onto the stage, commanding immediate silence from the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this special showcase. Today we present a new student whose extraordinary talent reminds us why we dedicate our lives to music education. Behind the curtain, Elijah took deep breaths, trying to calm his racing heart. The past weeks had been transformative. A specialist had diagnosed and treated the injury to his back, prescribed physical therapy, and given him exercises that had significantly reduced his pain. Daily lessons with Dr. Williams had refined his technique while honoring his natural interpretative gifts. And today, he would play for an audience for the first time. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Elijah Johnson, performing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. The applause was polite as Elijah walked onto the stage. He spotted his mother in the front row, saw her tears and her smile. He acknowledged Dr. Williams with a nod of gratitude, then sat at the magnificent grand piano, a far cry from the paper keyboard he'd practiced on for years. When he began to play, the audience ceased to exist. There was only the music, flowing through him like a river finding its true course after years of diversion. His fingers, now properly trained but retaining their natural instinct, brought forth sounds that filled the hall with emotion, joy, sorrow, yearning, triumph. In the audience, Victoria watched with complex emotions churning inside her. Her own recital the previous week had been technically flawless but had received only lukewarm acclaim. Now, witnessing Elijah's performance, she began to understand what her playing lacked, the soulful connection he achieved effortlessly. Richard Hartwell, not typically moved by classical music, found himself leaning forward in his seat, captivated by the performance. The boy he'd dismissed as the help's son was creating something of undeniable value and beauty. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of silence before the audience erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, including, after a moment's hesitation, Victoria. Dr. Williams returned to the stage as the applause continued. Ladies and gentlemen, as some of you may know, our conservatory offers one full scholarship each year to our most promising new talent. Today, I am pleased to announce that Elijah Johnson will receive not only the Williams Scholarship but also support for his college education and continued medical care for his injury. Martha covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed by blessing after years of struggle. Principal Edwards shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Dr. Williams continued, this talent might have been lost due to institutional failures and individual cruelty. Let this be a reminder that our responsibility as educators extends beyond teaching notes on a page. We must nurture the human spirit behind the music. The pointed remark was not lost on anyone present, least of all Victoria, who suddenly understood her unwitting role in a system that had nearly crushed an extraordinary gift. 1 year later, the Hartwell Mansion's music room witnessed a very different scene. Elijah sat at the piano, the same piano he'd once been forbidden to touch, giving Victoria pointers on interpretation of a Debussy piece. "Feel the water in it," he suggested. Debussy was painting with sound. Victoria nodded, her previous hostility replaced by grudging respect that had, over months of interaction, evolved into a genuine, if tentative, friendship. In the doorway, Elizabeth and Martha watched their children with shared satisfaction. "He's thriving at the conservatory," Martha said softly. "Dr. Williams says he's ready for his first competition next month." Elizabeth smiled. "And how are you enjoying your new position at the foundation?" After the events of the previous year, Richard Hartwell, partly from genuine remorse, partly from his wife's firm insistence, had created a position for Martha at the Hartwell Family Foundation, overseeing programs that supported arts education in underserved communities. Her perspective as both a parent and someone who had faced barriers to access had proven invaluable. "It's challenging," Martha admitted. "But good. Really good." Ms. Reynolds had not returned to Westridge Academy. The investigation Elizabeth initiated had uncovered a pattern of discriminatory behavior that could no longer be ignored. Mr. Davis had been appointed interim department chair for performing arts, implementing changes to make music education more accessible to all students. Richard entered the music room, pausing briefly to listen to Elijah and Victoria playing a duet, their hands moving in tandem across the keys, creating harmony from what had once been discord. "We should leave soon if we're going to make Elijah's recital," he reminded them. As they prepared to depart, Elijah approached Martha, embracing her tightly. "Thank you, Mom. For everything." Martha touched his face gently. "I always knew you were meant for more than what the world tried to limit you to." Dr. Williams was waiting for them at the conservatory, his face lighting up at the sight of his star pupil. "Ready to shine, Elijah?" Elijah nodded, confidence replacing the fear that had once defined him. As he walked onto the stage and the spotlight found him, he sent a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever force had guided his fingers to those forbidden keys 1 year ago. The music began, and with it, the next chapter of a story still being written, one note at a time. Dear friend, this story reminds us that talent knows no socio-economic boundaries, yet opportunity remains unequally distributed. Every day, extraordinary gifts go undiscovered because of prejudice, lack of resources, or systemic barriers. We must create a world where all children can develop their potential, regardless of their background or the color of their skin. By sharing stories like Elijah's, we highlight the importance of recognizing and nurturing talent wherever it's found. If this message resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content that celebrates triumph over adversity and reminds us of our power to create positive change, one life at a time.